What's up, guys? The welterweight division, every fighter doesn't have a fight. So let's look at the top 15 and matchmake for the entire rankings. What are some of the possible matchups that could be exciting for everybody? Let's start with the champion, Belal Muhammad. He's going to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov. That's the next fight that they're most likely going to do next. Number one contender is Leon Edwards, who says he's fighting in March. He's going to be on a fight night card in England, but he didn't say who his opponent is going to be. So who could fight Leon Edwards? I think there's a few options that he has. So number one could be Jack Della Maddalena. Jack hasn't fought in a long time. It's a better trip for him to go to England than the United States. But then again, they are having an Australia card. And now there's rumors that Jack is not going to be on that card. But regardless, the fight with Leon Edwards would be excellent. Two great strikers. Leon's kickboxing versus Jack's boxing. Some of the best you've seen in the UFC. So you could think if the fight is from far range, Leon is most likely going to have an advantage. But if it's in close range, Jack can start piecing up Leon along the fence. Because he's so good at cutting off the cage with his punches, intercepting the opponent's movements, and Leon's going to try to get out of there. He's going to try to either move out laterally or clinch up with Jack, which could put him in more danger of taking big body shots followed by overhands. And sometimes Leon throws wide counter punches, great for Jack to land his straight punches, beating him in those exchanges. But the thing is, Jack is kind of slow to move in. He doesn't move around a lot, slow footwork, so Leon could keep him at range, jabbing him and kick him to the body, kicking him to the legs for most of the fight. Leon has to do his best work at range, and he cannot be too hesitant to throw, because once Jack gets in close, I don't think Leon has the kind of boxing or even the clinch work to beat him in that area. So it could be a fantastic fight, man. Great fight between Jack Della Maddalena and Leon Edwards. Another fight that we could see is Sean Brady. Leon versus Brady is a different kind of fight where Brady's going to most likely take the fight to the ground. He could strike with Leon. In fact, he would most likely fight him the way Belal did. Just mix up the game, striking and wrestling constantly at a very fast pace. And I don't know if Leon's takedown defense is at the level to stop the wrestling of Sean Brady. He's very strong, great on the ground. Would be a much more difficult fight for Leon Edwards than against Jack Della Maddalena. Again, against Sean Brady, he's going to have to keep him at range, throwing out all these kicks and stuff. But that's the thing. If he throws out kicks, Brady can grab onto them, take him to the ground, and he's also faster with his footwork than Jack Della. So he can move into close range a lot faster than Jack could, and he also has the takedown shot, which Jack doesn't do. The third fight could be Joaquin Buckley, who's come off a win against Colby Covington, and he called out Kamaru Usman, but Usman said that he's injured, and that's why he hasn't been fighting. If Usman's not available, there is Leon, and Buckley has been fighting very often. He had 4 fights in 2024. He can begin his 2025 fighting in March against Leon, and if he wins, he gets a title shot. In fact, any of these guys that beat Leon is going to get a title shot. So that's like a hybrid between Jack Della and Sean Brady, because Buckley can also take him to the ground. He can also strike with him. If he gets in close, he could knock Leon out. But I do think Leon is the better striker of the two, and Buckley might not have the kind of wrestling to take Leon down consistently. So I think this is a much more competitive fight. But I think the fight you do for Leon is against Sean Brady. Perfect timeline. Brady hasn't fought in a few months. Leon wants to fight in March, and I think it's an excellent matchup. Both fighters are well-rounded. I think Leon has a striking advantage, but Brady might have the grappling advantage. He has the volume when he's the one pressuring in the fight, and Leon usually likes to sit back a bit, move around close to the cage, trying to land a counter shot or something like that, while Brady's going to be mixing up the game the entire fight. I think it's one of the higher skill level fights in the welterweight division, and hopefully Leon gets better from the Belal fight. Hopefully he's more aggressive, throwing more shots, going forward, and not allowing his opponent to back him up so easily and mix up their striking and wrestling successfully. Then there's Shavkat, who is going to be fighting Belal. Kamaru Usman, who's ranked number 3. He says that he's injured, so he's not going to fight anybody. Then we go to number 4, Jack Della Maddalena. He could fight Sean Brady. Let's say if Buckley gets the Leon fight. Jack versus Brady would be a very interesting fight, which stylistically is not great for Jack. Brady has a lot of volume. He's well-rounded. He can take the fight to the ground. This would be the most difficult fight in Jack Della's career, either against him or Belal Muhammad. Jack has solid takedown defense, but I don't know if it's at the level to stop Brady's. And he fights at a rather slow tempo. I'm not going to say slow pace, because there are moments where he's throwing a lot of punches, but the speed of his movements aren't that fast. I do think Brady is the faster fighter of the two. He's the better wrestler of the two. The only thing is, Brady cannot get intercepted or countered by, let's say, a knee or an uppercut or something like that. But banking on that is going to be very difficult for Jack to win. So I do think it's a very bad fight for Jack, but that is a fight they could do next. Number 4 versus number 5. He could also fight Joaquin Buckley. Let's say if Sean Brady gets the Leon fight. This is a much different fight. Buckley is wild at times. It could be countered by Jack's better boxing skills. Buckley may not have strong enough wrestling to consistently, again, out-wrestle Jack Della. Is going to be a similar thing to any other striker with solid takedown defense, but he does have the power to hurt Jack. The thing is though, Jack Della's boxing is so good, he's like the one fighter which I'm least concerned about getting hurt in a fight. His defense is so solid. When punches get thrown at certain fighters, even some of the top welterweights, it's like worrisome at times. It's like, yo, these shots can knock this guy out. When you're watching Jack Della defend punches, you're like never worried that he's gonna get knocked out. He's defending so precisely, with such high level skill, rolling with punches, blocking them, moving his head away from them, and all just seamless movement, like it's effortless for him. I don't think Buckley would knock him out. I actually like that fight for Jack, but I think it's a more competitive fight than if he fought Sean Brady. The other fight he could get is Ian Garry. Ian Garry's coming off a loss against Shavkat, but he did take on a short notice, so he did the UFC a favor. They could give him another fighter ranked above him, and it could be Jack Della because he has been inactive. That's a competitive fight, but I do think Jack would most likely win that. I think he's a better striker. I think he has good enough takedown defense to stop the wrestling of Ian Garry. Ian Garry's long and tall, but Jack's fought Randy Brown and guys taller than him before and had no problem with them. So not saying that Randy Brown's on the same striking level of Ian Garry, but the height and reach specifically about a fighter is something that's not going to be too much of an issue for Jack. So Ian Garry's going to have to keep him at range, throwing kicks and jabs and all that stuff, offset him with takedowns. But with that kind of game plan, I don't think Ian Garry would win a decision like that. He would be effective in neutralizing the fight, but he wouldn't be effective in causing damage, which is how you win on the scorecards. Jack would be the one that would most likely inflict the most damage, but Ian Garry's striking defense is better than Leon's, is better than Buckley's, and it might be better than Sean Brady's as well, so he might not get hit as much as some of those other guys, making it not a boring fight, but it would make it less exciting. That's a great fight. Now, which one would I want to see? It's tough with Jack Della Maddalena because he hasn't fought in a long time. He has one ranked win against Gilbert Burns, but he's ranked number 4. I think because he has been recovering for a while, he should wait for Kamaru Usman. Both fighters are recovering from something. I don't know what Usman was injured with or whatever. He said he's not 100% to come back yet. He was implying that he was injured in some way, so I think that's the fight you do. It's the fight the fans have been waiting for. Kamaru Usman versus Jack Della Maddalena. An excellent fight. Usman has the boxing and the wrestling. He also throws some good body kicks, whereas Jack Della, more one-dimensional, more just a striker who has decent takedown defense, but his wrestling is going to get tested in that fight unlike any other. And we'll see if those Gilbert Burns and Basel Hafiz fights were one-offs or two-offs, I guess, because he got taken down a lot from both those guys. And Usman is a much better wrestler, but at the same time, Jack Della is, I think, the most technical boxer Usman has ever fought in his career. And Usman is most likely not in his prime anymore. But Usman's never performed badly ever since he won that title all the way till now. And then we go to Sean Brady. So, of course, we have the Leon fight. Of course, we talked about the Jack Della fight, but you could also do Sean Brady versus Joaquin Buckley. That's a much more difficult fight for Brady than fighting Jack or Leon because Buckley is very explosive. He has decent wrestling. He could end the fight at any moment. He's that explosive takedown defensive fighter who's gonna be throwing bombs at him. That's a very, very interesting fight. I would love to see this fight. He could also fight Ian Garry. Now, I don't imagine they would do this fight, but Sean Brady would take him down and do what he wants with him, essentially. It wouldn't be too difficult of a fight for Brady. I think Ian Garry's takedown defense is decent, but I don't think it's on a level to stop Brady's wrestling. I think Brady would double leg him off his feet, single leg him off the cage. After establishing feints and jabs and stuff like that, Ian Garry would most likely have to finish this guy in order to win the fight. He would need to land like a head kick or a 1-2 or an uppercut intercepting him, something like that, you know. But the fight I want to see for Sean Brady is against Leon Edwards. And then we go to Joaquin Buckley. So we talked about the Leon fight. We talked about the Jack fight, the Brady fight. He could also fight Ian Garry. And this is a fight a lot of fans want to see. Number 6 versus number 7. It's a great fight as well because Ian Garry has good technical striking. He's very long and tall. Buckley, though, hits much harder. He's well-rounded enough to mix up the striking and wrestling, which is going to be very effective against Ian Garry. Ian Garry is going to do much better against a fighter who's going to attack him in one way, just striking or just wrestling, because he can use the other skill set. And the thing is, Buckley misses from range a lot of times. He could knock you out like he did against Stephen Thompson, but if you look at his fight with even Colby Covington, he was missing a lot of punches. You'll see those combos that he was throwing with his hands up, like those ending combo uppercuts were missing sometimes. And he could not do that against someone like Ian Garry or against fighters like Leon Edwards, fighters who can counter from range effectively. So that would be a great fight. But I think Joaquin Buckley versus Ian Garry is the fight to do next. Now, technically, Buckley's fighting one rank below him after beating Colby Covington, but I thought the winner, regardless if it was going to be Buckley or Colby, should fight Ian Garry next. It's a great fight. The explosiveness of Joaquin Buckley versus the quick range striking of Ian Garry, and we'll see if Ian Garry's takedown defense is actually that good against another fighter who is well-rounded. He's going to try and knock him out with all those lunging punches. Should be an excellent fight. Then we go to Ian Garry, who we talked about fighting Jack Della, talked about him fighting Brady, Brady and Buckley. The other fight they could do is against Colby Covington. I don't think they would do this fight, but Ian Garry really wants to fight Colby. Man, Kamaru Usman not fighting soon is really making the matchmaking much more difficult, because if he was around, like let's say if he could fight, I mean, they would most likely do him and Buckley. And that would open up Ian Garry to fight maybe Jack Della. But with him not able to fight, then who does Ian Garry go up against? Colby, maybe? Or he waits for Kamaru, or he fights the loser of Belal and Shavkat, something like that. The next fight for Ian Garry, I would say, I think the fight for Ian Garry is the Joaquin Buckley fight. And then we look at Gilbert Burns, and of course there's the Ian Garry fight. He could also fight Colby Covington. They've been in the top of the rankings for years together, and they never fought each other. And Gilbert Burns could be a very difficult stylistic matchup for Colby Covington, because he has the punching power, he's got the submission ability if Colby goes to the ground. Like, stylistically, he looks like a kryptonite for Colby. The only thing is, Colby does have the cardio, he has the volume and all that sort of stuff. Both fighters are not in their prime anymore, so it does make sense to have them fight each other, and that would be a good fight between veterans. Burns could also fight Geoff Neal, so Geoff Neal's ranked number 10, and that would be a horrible fight for Burns. Geoff Neal seems to be, at least off of that performance against RDA, he looked good. Geoff Neal could be in his prime, we have to see it in his next fight, so they could do that one with Burns. I think Geoff stuffs the takedowns and knocks him out on the feet. Now, they could do Burns versus Michael Morales. He would be used as a stepping stone. Morales would most likely finish him. He's stronger, he's more powerful, he's well-rounded, not crazy technical everywhere, but the guy's like a juggernaut, and Burns might not be able to take a big shot from Morales. Then there's also Carlos Prates, who again, Burns could be used as a stepping stone to bring Carlos into the top 10, and Carlos would destroy Burns. It would not be a good fight for Burns to fight any of those rising contenders. But I think Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales is the next fight. Both fighters are well-rounded, they're dangerous on the ground, both hit very hard, and it's the opportunity for Morales to be a top 10 fighter. And then the number 9 ranked Colby Covington. We talked about him fighting Ian Garry and Gilbert Burns. He could also fight Geoff Neal, which I don't think they would do this fight, but not a good fight for Colby, right? Geoff seems to be at his best right now. Colby's not as good as he used to be. There is also Colby versus Stephen Thompson, between two veterans, guys who have been in the welterweight rankings forever, and it is a fight where both fighters can win. This is in fact the fight I would do. Colby Covington versus Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson has the advantage in the striking. Colby has the advantage in the wrestling. Stephen Thompson has a wrestling weakness, so let's do Colby Covington versus Stephen Thompson. That would be really fun. And then we look at Geoff Neal. So Geoff Neal could fight Gilbert Burns. He could fight Colby Covington. He could also fight Michael Morales, which would be a very good fight. The striking speed of Geoff Neal, the takedown defense, the left straights, the high kicks versus the well-roundedness of Michael Morales, throwing huge shots, trying to get the takedown, to dominate with his ground and pound. And is he strong enough to take Geoff Neal down? That would be really interesting. There's also Carlos Prates. Striker versus striker, no takedowns from either fighter unless Geoff clinches up with him like he's done with other fighters before, but one of them would get knocked out most likely, and I think Carlos would eventually finish Geoff Neal. So then we look at Wonderboy. He could fight Colby Covington. He already beat Geoff Neal. I don't think they would do that. He could fight Michael Morales, which would be a horrible fight for Wonderboy. Morales will take him to the ground and most likely finish him with ground and pound or something. He could also fight Carlos Prates, which would be a striking match, but I think Wonderboy now would most likely get knocked out. But the best fight to do is Covington versus Thompson. And then Michael Morales. So he could fight Colby, he could fight Geoff Neal, he could fight Stephen Thompson, he could fight Gilbert Burns, but the fight that you do is against Geoff Neal. And then for Carlos Prates, this is an interesting one because there are a lot of opponents that they can throw him at. They want to do him versus Shavkat. So the UFC is willing to throw Carlos at anybody. But in a scheduled fight where both fighters sign the contract and, they have full training camps and all that stuff, I don't think you throw him at the top welterweights. You could do a fight between him and Burns, or Colby, or Geoff Neal, or even Stephen Thompson. Don't do the fight with Morales because you need these guys to go up in the rankings. There is also Vicente Luque, but that would mean that Prates is fighting down in the rankings, but all of those make sense. I don't want to see him fight Luque. I don't want to see him fight Morales, and Michael Page is fighting at middleweight, so you don't give him an unranked fighter, so you could do any of those fights for him. So I think the best fight to do for Carlos Prates is against Geoff Neal. That would be such an insane fight, man. One of the best fights, I think, in the welterweight division. Vicente Luque, who could he fight? Don't give him any ranked fighter, especially because the two guys above him would absolutely annihilate him, and they're in their prime. The guy above them is Stephen Thompson, who dominated Vicente Luque, and the guy above him is Geoff Neal, who gave him a brain hemorrhage. Let's do an unranked fighter for Vicente Luque. You can give him Muslim Salikov, you can give him Zaleski dos Santos. That fight will most likely end by a knockout. The boxing of Vicente Luque, his ability to grapple and take Salikov to the ground to submit him, versus the spinning attacks of Salikov and the precision of his punches, the fight will most
most likely end with a very quick finish, and I think it favors Vicente Luque, but it should be a good fight.
Or the perfect opponent. Do Vicente Luque versus Neil Magny. And it's crazy they never fought each other.
But then there's Neil Magny. Now, it's pretty much power versus volume. Can Magny keep Luque at the end of his punches and also stop the takedowns? You could do either of these fights, but I really like the Magny fight just because both these guys have been in the division for a long time. They've both been ranked for a long time and never fought each other.
I think it's a fight that both fighters can win, but I would favor Vicente Luque, especially if he fights the way he fought Themba Gorimbo. And then Michael Page has his fight. So that's how I would matchmake the top 15. These are some great fights, I think, but you could do any of these options. And leave in the comments below, how would you matchmake the welterweight division? What are the best fights that you want to see? Because there's a lot of good fights they can make here. And I'll see you guys in the next video.